Alright, thanks everyone for coming. This is the session 103, the OpenEmbedded BoF. Been a last minute room change, so if this is where you want to be, that's great. We had a BoF. It was actually, I guess, Nicholas and Ken that suggested we have a BoF in Burlington at the last Connect. And it went so well, everyone said, hey, let's do another one. So the point of a birds of a feather session is not for me to stand up here and talk about stuff, but it's for us to talk about things. There are two things that I thought would be great to talk about. Certainly if there are other things, we're certainly open to have them get brought up. The first thing that I thought would be great to talk about is meta-linaro. We have meta-linaro, we own it, we run it. A lot of different organizations have meta whatever, meta mentor, a whole bunch of meta intel, all those other ones. And so how do we stack up to them? Are we as easy to use as them? Are there things, I think there were a bunch of things that you, Kuhn, were talking about cleaning up. You had some cleanup ideas. If I'm not mistaken, the meta-linaro was kind of based off the meta-intel, which is kind of like a repository of repositories, and it seems that most other repositories are now becoming just sort of like Gumstix and the FSL, the Freescale ones. There's like multiple ones that you have to add. Instead of just adding a Freescale one, you have to add them separately, whereas with meta-linaro you kind of pull down one repository but then add them separately in your DB layers. So I don't know, is that the best way to do that or not?
Shall I give a short explanation about the difference in how we implement it?
Just in a sec. And the second thing is just general open embedded questions. So talk about, if anyone has any questions. Last time there are a bunch of teams within Linaro, of course, that use open embedded, and if anyone here has been using it, has questions, there are certainly a lot of great people here to talk to about that. As an introduction, there's we have Kuhn here, and Kuhn has been working with Linaro since probably the start, and then Kahem as well Kahem is with Comcast, Kuhn is with Linaro, and it's pretty amazing stuff that Comcast is doing right now with OpenEmbedded. So I don't know if Kahem would like to talk about that. You're giving a session?
Yeah, Thursday.
On Thursday, yeah. They're going to expand about the things, the way that Comcast is using OpenEmbedded. It's a pretty interesting use case. And of course, this room is filled with lots of OE experts, so it's a great opportunity to talk. So anyway, if you, Kuhn, would like to talk about meta-linaro.
So, standing between. This is meta-linaro, the repository, and not meta-linaro, the layer. So we have 1 Git repository with a bunch of layers, one of them being meta-linaro. We also have meta-big-endian, meta-AR64, meta-linaro toolchain, and meta-linaro integration. We separated that so everything is opt-in. If you only want to use Linaro toolchain, you include Linaro toolchain layer, and then you say use the Linaro toolchain, and you can get the Linaro.
So this is not in READMEs explained really well, like all the layers.
Right. We still need to work on that, because in the README we also wanted to say this is how you contribute patches, because we use Gerrit, but our Gerrit is only open for @linaro.org or addresses, and we wanted to fix that, and that's still on the to-do. But if you want to expand the README, keep poking us or send a patch. So we basically split it. Me or Fabi, or Linaro dev, that also works.
We know where Gerrit and visit with me.
There's a
And
README.
I'm speaking on behalf of everybody.
Yes, and since ARM3 support is now in OE core, so in theory our meta-AR64 layer can just disappear. I think 90% can go, but we're experimenting with ILP32. so we probably still need that layer for that, but a lot of stuff can go. We've tried to keep it as small as possible, so meta-linaro toolchain only has a toolchain. Meta-linaro integration has the stuff that we submitted upstream, but is still pending review because we haven't paying the Intel Foundation enough money, etc., etc. That goes into Linaro integration. So that should be also as small as possible. Our goal for Linaro would be no layers and that everything is upstream, but we have some customizations or under review things, experimentations that we do while we have our layers.
Yeah. So our layers are meant to be used by us. It wasn't supposed to be used by someone else. So we don't know exactly who is using it and if we can do things better to improve the integration of our layer in some of our builds.
So I think this is like one of the layers, like toolchain layer, right? So that is something that everybody would use in general. That's my opinion. They may not use, your additional layers, but meta toolchain layer, because there are optimizations that are in our GCC that you won't find in upstream GCC. So I think that layer, you have to become a provider or a maintainer of the layer. That is not just used by you, but you can expect that there are users which are outside relying on that.
And then I think in our toolchain as a layer, we're managing it pretty well. We had some issues that we had a backport from OpenEmbedded that broke GCC 4.8, but we moved to 4.9, but we fixed that within a few days. So meta-linaro toolchain is one of the more successful layers within the repo and well maintained.
So it seems to be an issue, this one, because we are tracking master, basically. So once we move to new release, development release of OpenEmbedded, we don't really build anymore the other the releases. So sometimes this is broken, we have patches from people because we are still using the latest official release. So
the breakage was actually caused by a backport, and I still say that backport should not have gone into OE core because it broke things. And it broke things for us, just as people said. So it's not really our fault that it broke, but we only fixed 4.9 and not 4.8.
My point is that we don't do QA anymore for that, so should we do that?
I think, yeah, because, speaking on behalf of, like, say, RDK, right, for ARM platforms, we are using Meta toolchain from meta-linaro, and we would definitely like to, this to be
To
maintained.
do QA for OE core release branches.
Yeah.
For
Stable branch.
Stable branch.
Stable
release
branches.
branches.
Yeah.
They're not stable branches. Like I said, the backwards going in,
So
break stuff.
we there's some breakage.
Release branches.
That's probably something that we can catch up.
Yes. And right now we've been creating release branches in the meta-linaro repository when people say that something is going wrong, when master becomes incompatible. We might in the future say when there's no re-release, we'll also tag and branch our stuff to be in lockstep. We
Yes.
can be better at that. I
Yeah.
usually just freeze the meta-linaro revision in Angstrom. So that's what I do.
Mhm.
Would it make sense to pull the toolchain layer out and put it on GitHub and make it
That would be just awkward for our maintenance thing.
So see, the thing is, I still want, like, Linaro to be a maintainer of that layer, and whether it is in this, umbrella or elsewhere, is immaterial. It's more about maintenance of that.
And while people are starting to get layers, cloning in Git repository is hard. Maybe not for the people in the room, but for people out there. When we would separate our Linaro layers in one layer per repository, people won't get it. So that's a different problem.
Correct.
Pokey solves it by putting everything in one Git repository and smashing it together, but then people don't know what upstream anymore is, and we don't want that either. So it's
mix up
the
both.
least bad solution that we have now.
Yeah.
There are a lot of improvements that we can do, so if you have an issue with our layer separation or anything, just tell us. It works well enough for us, but there's always room for improvement.
Who would we need to talk to, or is it worth, should we have meta-linaro mailing list? Probably.
We problem is because we use Garrett, and Garrett is it still Linaro only, or have they finally opened it up yet?
We are working on that. We know about the issue, but it's still not resolved. So I'm going to take again a note
So
on this.
till we have sorted out our contribution model, we don't really need a mailing list. We could have a mailing list if people would send patches, and then we go like, yeah, we have to put it manually in Garrett, and it would send the wrong message. But we would really like external contributions and have our own mailing list, but we don't have the right infrastructure for that yet. So it's a bit of a chicken and egg problem, but right now it would not be constructive to have our own mailing list. But in the future, yes.
Personally, I'm not convinced that we want to have a specific mailing list, just because I think it's an integration tree, and we want to upstream or downstream, whatever you feel better. We want to move everything we can on OE core, and that's what we are doing. So
But for
does it
the
make
toolchain?
sense? Yeah, there's a few use cases, but the traffic is not very high.
Because if you're building an ARM board, you're probably using, if you didn't fall into the pokey trap, you are using the Linaro toolchain. That's basically it. If you look out there how people are using it. So that our meta-linaro, the repository, is very, very, very popular. And
Yeah, I mean, as I said, like, RDK events on it. And there are a lot of people who are doing
And the toolchain layer rarely breaks, because if it breaks, I get a lot of email when it breaks.
Yeah. But do you feel the channel of communication is missing?
Yes. So I think, there should be a mailing list, whether, you got, or some way of communicating. I understand if you have a review system like Garrett, right? But Garrett doesn't solve that problem of questions. So with Garrett, yes, I can, post a patch, and then I can have a discussion on the patch.
So we probably should fix our README, the top level README and the sub-repository README to clearly say, send your patch to Linaro dev, we're using Garrett, etc. So when people read the README, they know how to contribute and know that
Yes.
it isn't like this, but it goes.
Yeah. So you could even name the discussions or something like, so make sure that the name of the mailing list is pretty clear, that it's not about patches.
I think for the time being, we can use Linaro dev, because that's quite a low volume list.
Okay.
Except Fridays, where we all post our 50 reports.
And it might then, eventually when you have Git reviews, you can redirect some of that messages to that layer, to that mailing list as well. So, because most of the time people follow Garrett and then they follow mailing lists. Those
Yeah.
are two separate things.
I've been trying to, when I put the patch in Garrett, I try to be, I want the patch to be immediately able to go into the repository, so that's the final version. And most of the patches posted are good enough to go in immediately, but there were a few patches, I think some from Trevor posted a patch set, and I'm like, this bit makes sense and this no. But that I didn't put that in Garrett. And tried to discuss it on the list, and I finally said, hey, you're discussing it on the list, it's not in Garrett yet. I was like, yeah, we probably need to figure out something, how we can coordinate this better.
Right.
Because I do, for one line of patches, Garrett is super annoying to review things, because clickety, 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 click.
Yes.
It's bad for our contribution model. It's flaky because nobody can push things except the poor people.
So one of the problem with Garrett being is that if you are working with the Garrett, then you need to have those tools to interact with it, right? Mailing lists. So developers like you who are working on other layers have contribution model through mailing lists or some other things. They have to do an additional step or a different way of now this patch. The other one is simple, where the discussions happen over the mailing list, and then finally a version of the patch gets accepted and committed, right? But in here, there's a divided model. So what I mean is, from Linaro layer point of view, it's okay. But when you're playing a larger set, right? So he might have patches for different other layers. So the developer has to have a different workflow here, a different one there. So that's what I see, could be.
One of the issues I've noticed with our workflow is, like I said, there are various recipes in upstream OE core and meta OE, like FW2S to test ACPI. That recipe is in meta OE, I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
We make a patch, and meta OE has, what is it, a 2-week cycle approximately, because it has to go through Jenkins, etc. That's fine, but we need it in this cycle, so we overlay the recipe. And we now have FW2S overlaid and ACPI tests as well. So someone from LEG comes along and say, oh, I have an update for that, and he sends a patch against meta-linaro integration. And we're actually saying, like, yeah, that's nice, but actually you should send a follow-up patch to meta OE, so saying if that patch goes in, here's another patch to update this. So it's hard to coordinate that, and then sometimes go like, oh, this patch looks good, +2, applying gear, and like, wait, that was a patch against integration, that should not go in there. So there are a bit of workflow issues, and not everyone in Linaro realizes that the stuff in integration is actually a copy of upstream that's pending approval and might just go away.
Yeah. So I think externally speaking, there was the kernel providing layer and the toolchain providing layer. They will be definitely used as is. People would want to use those two layers, and they would want Linaro to maintain them in sync with upstream releases.
Yes, I think we have been successful with the toolchain layer, but mostly not by design, but by accident. Because if we use it internally, and apparently we have managed to do it in such a way that external people can use it.
Yes.
And the V8 stuff too. I mean,
Yes, that's now in OE core, so we can dismantle that bit by bit and try to fix the OE core one. But that's a political issue. We have to go through Mint River now to do that.
Yeah, ideally, I mean, the Linaro toolchain layer, if everything was upstream, right? But then upstreaming into GCC takes time as well.
Yes.
So I don't see that disappearing like V8 layer. And kernel goes same way. So you'll always have a Linaro toolchain and a Linaro kernel no matter what.
Yes. Now we have to fix gold. The gold linker is broken. I failed to report it. Like, I sent an email about that, and then Cam said, "Good, it's broken." I said, "Yes, I know."
Yeah, we historically don't care. There's never been any real support for gold from Linaro, which why exactly that is open to question. So, but my favorite.
Yeah, if you have like things like WebKit and Blink and Chromium stuff, yeah, gold goes a long way.
Yeah, it uses a few gigabytes less when using for RAM.
So I mean, there's a clear benefit there to use it. I mean, I understand like it might be flaky here and there, but
So that's another issue. I also get the bug report for the Linaro toolchain. Like, oh, I'm using meta-linaro and I have this problem. Most of the time, it's a common problem. Like, yes, it's default for hard floating. You have soft float binaries. Go figure it out. But some like, oh, the gold linker is broken, and then I have to forward it. And we probably should put that in the README as well. Like, yes, it's a Linaro toolchain, but please send that to toolchain list or toolchain@linaro.org.
Yeah, Linaro-toolchain at list.linaro.org. Yeah, yeah. I can't guarantee anything will happen for gold just because it's in a weird limbo state.
I did just remember that. I see you sitting here and we're talking about toolchain. Like, wait.
The other question I have is, should Linaro become more involved in working on infrastructure? I mean, you see some companies like Wind River or Mentor or Intel, really pushing, BitBake, and they're adding classes and image types and all that sort of stuff.
We haven't really needed it. It would be nice if we could have a really tight integration between OE and Lava. but that's such a huge project that it goes through Jira and project management, and that needs buy-in from members. At least that's how I understood it, because that's large-scale work, or we can't do that in a week. That's like multiple engineering months to do something like that. And I don't think we don't have a meeting yet. Like, I think Lava would be the only example.
I think you should kind of be on behalf of the members to drive actually kind of open embedded actual agenda, because then you kind of have actually much stronger potential and weight. Kind of one of the issues that I talked with you, kind of what you talked about. The next big thing for the open embedded in general actually is the testing, in my opinion, right? So, but somebody needs to go on actually and go and write actually kind of like testing where is actually recipe to put actually them in, right? And kind of who will do this actual job. And kind of like, in my opinion, actually, so kind of if you get enough momentum and request from the members, it's just a bit tricky actually, because it's sort of like silent, like yeah, we have LNG, we have Congo, kind of, but all, more kind of many of those actually kind of like they still produce some kind of open embedded requirement, but how do you, in my opinion, actually, it's kind of a very good opportunity actually just maybe even like to drive some content and agenda actually within open embedded.
But let's look at the keynote. Hi, we are introducing Linaro boards, and we're going to support Android and Debian. That's it.
It's like, that's okay.
No OE. Yeah, we have an OE layer, but that's not mentioned in the
But everybody
press release.
knows kind of open embedded will just work with it, right? So it's
So I think my point to that is like, you know, you can take that back and feedback as well, is that the fundamental requirement of that setup is that you need to have that particular box to build it. And in my use case scenario, I might still be deploying a 96 board onto a set-top box, but I might not want to set up a 96 board build farm to build it first. So it's a very genuine case, and I don't expect 96 board to be powerful enough like a Xeon that, you know, I can deploy it in the set-top box at home as well as I can do a, you know, bit-baked blob. So that use case is always going to be there. If you're going to push for something like a native compile, right, you are basically enforcing or limiting yourself to those either data centers that you go and buy you know, space on those data centers to do a native compile, or something else. So I mean, you know,
You can rent the Linaro service for that nowadays.
yeah, whatever. But what I mean is, like, you know, there is this use case that you will always have that are not server companies but might still want to deploy.
We need more feedback or pushback from member companies that we need OE and need more engineering time for OE. And well, we're starting to track our time better that we spend on OE and other tasks. And so it might work out in the end that it shows like, oh, we have 3 people working full-time on OE and not getting work, and we need to hire more OE people. But
I'm hearing several different things. So we are not connecting on the QA side. So I mean, we do layer side, we do build separately from full project. Now we have QEMU machine for AMBI8, so we can do also some testing, but there's basically no communication. There's some work with the Java team for that part, so there's probably some things to do around that. Now, there's some project, well, 96 board is mentioned that, yeah, I mean, it's a pre-release, so we have time to produce all the things that we need and support.
we have time, but it's not mentioned anywhere in the documentation that actually OE exists at all in the 96 board thing. It would have been nice if a Linaro board says, for Linaro we release for 3 things, Ubuntu/Debian, Android, and OpenEmbedded, and then we're going to produce a board, and you have builds for the same 3 things, and now they leave one out. Was that intentional, or just George doesn't really know that OE exists?
I think it's intentional, simply because you are the only one using it and the only one testing it, and nobody from QA perspective of 96 board has tested it. there's no QA behind it, so we just.
There's no QA behind
If you
that. There's
make-
no official QA behind
So
anything.
maybe it should be.
Yeah,
Makes you feel
everybody,
pain.
everybody else has much more tested Android and Debian for sure.
Yes,
So,
but not officially.
And as a system, that's another. That's
If it
kind
makes
of,
you feel better, Ken, I've seen slides for 96 board where OE is mentioned. It was just not mentioned today, but it's.
If you go
people
to
know.
GitHub/96 boards, there's a layer for that. We already did that, but it was like, we should do that because people will want that, not because we were told to do it.
we haven't been told to do it. It's for the commission project. I mean,
Yes.
what we have done is on our own time.
Yes.
It's a different story.
Yes, exactly.
And it does solve a good set of problems where we can have those 96 boards, and then a lot of like competing soft vendors can contribute to that. As a guy who's consuming those inputs, it's good for us that we can say get it working on 96 board, and then we are good there, right? But then it basically segregates completely. It says that we will not be doing cross compilations, right? So essentially then that cannot be adopted because the whole infra that we are doing is cross compilation based.
I'm kind of like a bit surprised. What it will take to make a 96 to run OpenEmbedded? It's just kind of
It's done.
receipt. No,
It's
it's
just
like
not mentioned.
It's just trivial thing. Actually, kind of compile the kernel and get actually kind of the user land, kind of like basic user land that you're already building for H64, right? That's it. No, am I missing something? It's just.
In theory, it's
just
trivial.
Yeah, it's more press release and communication. So I get it that OE wants to. Well, I'm not meaning to say OE because it's people, but some recognition from the work that we are contributing around OpenEmbedded in general.
So for me, personally, I
But
would
it's
like
all- it's
members
all-
to ask for open embedded things, and it would be nice that if in a keynote you make an announcement that it also gets mentioned in the software support so that members hear, oh, Linaro is doing Android, Debian, open embedded.
Getting things on NPR.
Good, but if we want members to push us for OE, well, like we're saying,
That's the thing. We are not pushing for OE. Like it was saying, it's driven by the members' requirements. So, for example, some groups are using that in some use cases, and that's what we are driving now. What we probably want is to be a better citizen with regard to OE community. Maybe take mentorship of something. Maybe be more contributing on the QA side of things, especially ARM, because we are interested by ARM. That's what we need to do.
and then what Victor said, OE has peak tests, and it would be nice if everything that we Linaro have a recipe for, make sure that peak test works, so you can have your runtime test and your main check thing. But we currently don't do that because it's optional and no one is really asking for it.
So that's the issue actually, kind of how we need to work actually with our steering committee actually members and the message what kind of like we need to drive so it goes actually back to you guys so you get actually more resources. That's one question. The second question that I have, do you guys want to kind of limit yourself only actually by the ARM problems, or you kind of like want to play actually bigger role in just kind of like testing what I mentioned? It's just general problem for all architectures, right? In my opinion, actually, you should kind of like do both, and that's kind of we can use actually Linaro members if potentially can use Linaro just to drive even a general open embedded agenda somehow, right? And if it's only actual ARM, I'm kind of like curious actually kind of ask you actually kind of what other forums do I have to drive this actual agenda, right? So
We are limited in resources. We are doing some x86 builds, for example, code engine, because we want this VR cross-platform. Right? But I don't think actually we can.
but it's not only builds, right? For example, this p-test actually. So effectively, kind of what you mentioned actually, Debian, right? From an Android testing. From my point of view, actually, their testing is actually kind of system level testing. It's just kind of they assemble actually the whole thing. They try to solve actually certain actual problems, and it breaks, doesn't work, right? We know kind of like I'm building actually system on top of it. I know that it's super expensive, even like to go and was sort of unit package testing, in my opinion, actually kind of like underutilized in kind of like in general the kind of whole workflow of the thing. So in my kind of like I really would love to see actually kind of open embedded in general to have actually this actual testing actually pushed, kind of having recipe infrastructure is already in place. But somebody needs to go and actually kind of invest on doing actually this recipe being actually kind of test aware. And then they can be actually kind of connected to, it still can be done in the ARM context, right? So kind of all those kind of like GDB actual ARM regression, right? LibUnwind, all those actually kind of guys actually kind of be just throwing actually out there and then kind of discover problem only when we try to use them. And we probably can get actually much better quality actually kind of video actually upfront. But somebody needs to go and actually keep writing those actually kind of test updates on the recipes, and they will not be only ARM specific. Everybody else also benefits from it. So,
Well, last year in 2014, there was a lot of interest in Lava from a lot of members of the OE community. And in fact, the mailing list was even set up to sort of,
Yeah.
I think Paul Eggleton and
One of the issues was that the OE people were talking to the Lava people, and that was quite okay, but the people who would actually have to do the work, the Spacelines people, were not really involved in that, and it's like it's a big project, and I think
and it fizzled.
and
but
it fizzled.
It would have been a good chance to
Yes.
do something that was more than just.
Lava is orchestration, right? I'm just kind of going after more actually individual packages.
Yes,
So
but
it's-
Lava is
it's-
the big
it's-
picture. This is, well, we probably need Lava for beat test to dispatch all the beat test things. So we
Yeah.
cannot do without Lava because we don't have 100,000 boards.
Yeah, I mean, p-test is it does need a front end. And that can be Lava for sure.
Just
No doubt about that.
beat test is getting your make check and your unit test run on a board or an emulator as part of the build.
Right.
That's the background. So what you say, if you want to do unit testing, if you update the recipe and then run the unit test, then we can spot breakages earlier, not at the end of the month when we do a full test and like, oh, our browser doesn't start up. Why doesn't the browser start up? And then we trace it all back to a bug in GCC. That could have been avoided if we would do beat test or whatever, in theory. Because beat test is
And you can, and probably you could also kind of use to monitor for regressions and all this stuff,
Yes.
right? But in my opinion, it would be quite next level in terms of like offering what comes out actually from Linaro and the quality actually the kind of material. So in some sense, okay, we have GDB guys, you can pick up actually new version actually of an embedded, right? And then you kind of it flows actually to Linaro, and we have kind of like GDB actually p-test that runs, compare actually results with the previous run, and like say, look, like you regressed actually kind of like here in this particular functionality. But maybe kind of, it's not like Linaro job actually maybe to fix it, but maybe actually we just go to file the bugs that we get in the community and just kind of go address this actual stuff. Otherwise, it's not formalized, and it's like ad hoc and what I call underutilized actually stuff.
And then runtime testing is the big missing thing in OpenEmbedded in general. There's the p-test, but that's it. Rare OpenEmbedded, when you want to get something in OE core, they said the auto builder has to green, but it's only a build test. There have been patches sent to fix multilib that basically moved files to a different place where the library couldn't find them anymore. So the auto builder said green because there was no QA error anymore, but if you try to run it, it didn't work anymore.
Right.
So runtime testing is needed. So I would
is only a certain level of check. It's not.
I would love Lava
Yeah,
integration
yeah.
directly into
Oh, yeah.
OE.
It's a lot of values. I think something.
If we don't get Lava into OE, then someone's going to solve that problem. And
Different.
then Lava, yeah, and then Lava suddenly they're going to become that Linaro only thing that no one cares about.
Correct.
To summarize, we have two pieces actually, just kind of to teach OpenEmbedded to have unit test aware recipes, right? And then we have our orchestration actually kind of like the Lava driving those tests and qualifying actually those actual open source packages, and like maybe actually kind of even providing feedback to community about actually kind of their state, right?
The active maintaining, active testing is a big challenge when you come to that point where you start running make check of various things. You know, if you take an example of Beijing new based testing, right? So they have this X fail thing, which is known to fail. Right? Yeah, expected failures. But that list is variable, right? So somebody has to look in all those results all the time when like your GCC guys fixed a bug, and then that X fail became a pass or not, and then you have to actively track that up and down. And so basically, the one part is the infrastructure, which is obviously half in place, half not. Second problem is when you have the infra in place to make it more reliable, where people can depend on the testing results, right? It has to be actively maintained as well.
Ideally, yes, but kind of like there is a value if nobody even like maintains. So in some sense, actually, I'm actually kind of a consumer. I can run actually my own baselines, right? So if the infrastructure is already there and the orchestration is already there, it will be my job to compare results. Ideally, yeah, that's kind of somebody monitors and files a bug. That's just a new one, right?
Yeah.
But even like if you just kind of have enough recipes and orchestration, that would be
Right.
really cool
The
as
infra
well.
piece is the first and foremost.
Even historical data is valuable. Even if no one looks at it, you can say, oh, it's broken. Oh, it has been broken for 3 months.
Right.
Go there.
Right.
Yeah. It's a bit pie in the sky. Do we have any questions about how we're currently using OpenEmbedded or how we can implement your favorite Linaro project? Yeah.
Yeah, I think my general feedback is like more participation in terms of like whether it is upstream or whether you maintain your own community around the week. So have an open channel where like Linaro Û's specific discussions or any discussion that pertain to Linaro could be happening. It might initially have few members, but I think that will go a long way with recognizing the effort of Linaro in general.
But it's in the community sense, recognizing the effort that Linaro does on OpenEmbedded is different from when the Yocto project says recognizing the effort Linaro does. We need to be really clear on it because the last one is a really political thing.
Yes. I'm not worried about those parts. I mean, what I'm thinking is use to the end guys who are using Linaro, enhancements or want to use those kind of things. And a forum for them to discuss is what I'm asking.
So I think we can start by fixing the regions to be clearer. That would help a lot already.
It will go a long way. So that's probably very low hanging fruit.
Yes. That would set the expectations at the right level.
Yes.
Are you taking notes?
That's right.
Excellent.
So we finally have a document that doesn't say father needs to do. We now say who needs to do or Trevor needs to do.
Yeah, that's the main for now.
So right now, like the machine layer, the V8 is sort of a machine layer, right?
Yes.
So you are posting all of them together, which is fine, I think, from my understanding. But I think, like moving forward, probably you're moving them out, so probably you're not interested in having hosting machine layers, right? But this 96 boards becomes a different perspective there, right? So you want
We have a 96 boards layer where we're going to put the 96 board machine, and that depends on meta-AR64 and meta-linaro. Well, it optionally it depends on that because you can build it against OE core if you wish. That's how it's currently implemented
For the first board.
for the first board. Yes.
Number 2 is going to mess everything up.
I don't think so. I don't think so. Fine. You started something, so we need to continue.
I mean, it should be seen as two separate things. There's meta, whatever relationship with Û's and
96 boards is not Linaro.
It's
Even if it is, it's not.
It's a community project, and we.
But the air quotes.
It's separate. I mean, you put yourself as a maintainer of meta-96 board layer, so actually you can do whatever you want.
Yes.
No, I mean it's really separated.
But so how are we going to manage meta-96 board versus other base boards? I mean, there are going to be boards maybe with SoC that have existing base board layers. So how do you then?
That will probably depend then be in saying meta-96 boards requires meta-freescale, meta-Qualcomm or whatever.
That's a possibility that you.
That's a possibility. We'll see how it works out, because it might be that the rumor was that there will be a 96 boards Git tree and that every vendor will collaborate in that Git tree. And if that's the case, then
Well,
you
you're
really
looking-
need.
One layer.
You are looking only at the kernel.
It should be that
Yes.
single image, no?
Yeah, of course it would be
So
one day.
like one less.
Yeah, one day it would be. And that Git tree one day would be just mainline. But
Media, 3D, etc.
it's not just the kernel. I mean, OpenEmbedded is not just about the kernel. So you have
Yeah.
graphics,
You have the
you can have
graphics
QD5, GStreamer, X, Woerner, all that stuff.
We'll see that when we get the boards, because nothing is being mentioned about a media accelerator in the high keyboard.
Yeah.
They only talk about Mali. I'm very sure there's a media accelerator in there as well. There's no talk about it, so we don't know yet.
Yeah,
So
what-
hopefully or ideally we can just say for board 2 of 96, whatever the name is, include Meta, Qualcomm, or I think it was Qualcomm that was being mentioned, and then you get this GStreamer, the QT5, etc. But for kernel bootloader, Meta 96 boards should be enough. So the Qualcomm layer should be an optional dependency.
I think it will be
We'll
good
have to
like
see.
if the machine layers, like they divided into like a common and then board specific layers.
Well, imagine if there is a meta-96 board with a TI chip. Right? It would be contrast in between the meta-BO, the meta-TI, and now the meta-96.
So something like
We'll have to see. It depends per silicon vendor, and it even depends per layer. For example, I would not want to have to support a board with a freescale chip, because Meta freescale is broken by default and they've refused to fix it. So we'll have to do it on a case-by-case basis.
We have to be pragmatic on this one.
Yes. So like a case-by-case basis. Maybe we can get away by not including the vendor layer. Maybe we can.
So it begs the question, actually, 96 boards actually, is it technical commonality or just marketing?
Marketing.
So maybe actually kind of there is no need for there is actually need for the kind of meta actually high tech and meta.
The way you say just, I mean, that's not true.
Yeah.
There are, I mean, there is a goal that
We don't.
there is a goal that there would be a common kernel, and I mean,
We already have common care like meta open embedded, right? Like open embedded core. It's like yeah, it's open, but yeah, at a certain point actually kind of like they start differentiate each other, and the whole idea of layering, that kind of like the differences actually would be isolated like in the layers, and we combine them actually kind of like as you want. So it's effectively if you want to just create marketing meta layer, which is in reality actually where you do have different hardware underneath, doesn't make sense. So.
But if we believe the spec says recent mainline kernel. So say TI makes a 96 board compatible board, and they use a recent mainline kernel with the AM335X chip. That's great. So we have 3.18, 3.19, a kernel. And then someone says, I want to use all the accelerators in that chip. And then you include the meta-TI layer. And then you notice that all the accelerators only work with the TI 3.14 kernel. Like Fadi says, we need to be pragmatic with that. So we can say you can include the TI kernel to get all the nice stuff working, but that won't work with the kernel that we're pushing from the 96 board standpoint. So we need to view it on a case-by-case basis. It's nice if we run a 3.20 kernel and the 3D drivers only work with a 3.2 kernel.
That's why I don't think it's marketing. I think that we can control the vendors. They are going to produce some boards. They are going to provide some software stack, and sometimes we'll be able to make things better ideally everything works on mainline, but we know all the reality. As soon as you want some enablement, you can't get everything. So yeah, we might do something in some way at the beginning. When we have 2 boards, when we have 3 boards, we are going to need to change things because it's too hard to maintain in the initial plan and so on.
We need more boards to find out, because it might be that our current
Yeah.
way scales and might not.
The first one is the first mission, it's okay.
The first one you throw away.
Yeah. And then
That's why I was saying number 2 is gonna miss everything.
So we'll see.
I mean, actually, we have a free 18 kernel, and there's patches submitted from online, so we can go to online. Obviously, they don't have the same enablement and so on. So already we have already 2 different kernels. I don't mention the 3.10 that we have also. Not that we don't care because we want to move forward. But, first board already 3 different kernels.
Did during the demo already 2 different kernels. So yeah. So 5 minutes ago,
Yep.
for people wanting continuing the 96 board discussion, in Tokyo, I think on 2 o'clock there will be the hardware discussion, and after the break there will be a software discussion.
Yeah, so another thing I wanted to mention as well, like, as I asked for more maintenance of Linaro chain, for instance, after the fact, what happens is you're seeing that, you got the CVE patches, the GLibC, right? Then Linaro toolchain freezes at certain point of time when you move over, and GLibC 2.20 means you stop there. I think you don't do I don't know, internally we do backports of those CD patches, I don't know, but you stop seizing, right? So at some point you make release and you keep moving.
Once in a while we look to OE, what patches they do, and we import them. So
Yeah.
Linaro GLibC is Linaro GLibC plus a bunch of OpenEmbedded patches.
Correct. So right now what happens is we carry those patches in Linaro layer. It would be nice if it could be tooled such that it can directly use it from OE core. So that way it can get the patches directly from OE core.
Ideally, someone would step up to maintain stable branches upstream, because this gets discussed all the time with GLibC, that Red Hat have got their own stable branch,
Right.
SUSE have got their own stable branch, Ubuntu have got their own
Yes.
stable branch, and everybody's doing the same work, and they should really coordinate
Exactly.
stable branches, but it
Yes.
just requires someone to volunteer. I think.
All right, well, let's call it there. Thank you so much for coming out.